Hi, I'm Scott Jones, and this is the Attuned Parent Podcast. If parenting your teen feels heavier than you expected, you're not alone. On this podcast, we talk about what's really happening underneath anxiety, defiance, shutdown, and family conflict, using attachment science, nervous system awareness, and practical tools that actually work. Because behavior is protective before it's problematic, and regulated parents increase influence. Let's get started. Welcome to this week's podcast. For the first 4 episodes, you've been listening to me talk. Thought we'd do something a little bit different today. So I've invited Steve, my producer, to come on board today. I've had a lot of questions about some of the things we've been talking about, and questions I've been asked by my clients over the years, and even questions that Steve has. And so I asked Steve to come on, and we're just going to do a question and answer kind of session today. So Steve, welcome. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here. I love the podcast. I love the content that you're putting out. And I think this is, I'm excited for this one because I think you do get asked a lot of great questions. And this is a way for us to take those questions and hopefully give our listeners back what they're looking for.
Awesome. Well, I should say just first off that not only is Steve my producer, but he's very talented. And most importantly, he's a father of 3 and really 3 more because you got a bunch of add-ons.
Kind of 6, yeah.
Yeah.
At this point.
So we're both parents. We're both in this together. I like to talk about this is all same boat therapy. We're kind of all in the same boat. And so what do you have for me? Shoot with your questions.
Well, I think one of the most important questions that we should start with is who is the podcast actually for? You know, every parenting resource claims to be the one, or it claims to be for everyone, but then it's not. Yeah. So, how would you define who this podcast is being created for?
Yeah. Well, I think this is for that parent who is kind of doing everything right on paper, but they still feel like things are getting away from them. So these are the parents who are, reading the books, going to the parenting classes. They're trying boundaries. They're setting consequences. They're trying to be more patient. They're doing all the things. They're engaged. They're in it. And somehow it still feels like the gap is getting bigger every day,
I think that's a pretty common theme where people feel like they're working hard, but they're just not getting traction.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know about you. I didn't get a parenting manual when I became a parent.
I think I lost mine.
So I think we're all looking for that. So I'm hoping to give people a map and parents a little bit of a map of what to do, especially with teenagers and in these hard moments that we face with teenagers. Because I find that if we don't have a language for what we're trying to accomplish, 2 things tend to happen. Either we go to what we know, which a lot of times means let's clamp down the control, get more stern, more consequences, or a lot of times we just become so overwhelmed we kind of put our hands up and give up. And both of those are going to hurt the connection.
When you talk about it in the first episode that the podcast is often for that parent that's lying awake at night. I mean, they may be listening to this podcast in the middle of the night because they're feeling like they have just reached a point where they have no hope, no solutions. Why do you start there?
I start there because I think that's where the truth is of this. We all can relate to that. And I just think that's real. Those examples I give of the parent late at night or, dad in the kitchen, different settings, same story. We feel like we don't know what's happening here, and it's really scary. As a parent, we want so bad to have that connection with our kids. And when we see our kids struggling, that's really overwhelming.
Yeah, you mentioned in one of the episodes that there's a mom whose voice is cracking while she's talking to you.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a common theme in the people that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. The kids that I work with, at Stillwater Academy, they're not bad kids, right? And I think every parent wonders what's happening. And underneath all that fear is this fear that we're losing connection. And so I start there usually because the parents who I think are going to be listening are the parents that are in the middle of the fight. They're right in the middle of the kind of chaos that is parenting. And so I'm trying to give them some help.
People who care, people who are trying things, and people who want tools and resources,
right?
Because it's what they're currently doing isn't working. Now, you also talk about how you guide parents towards listening to their instincts and how important that is. It's important that they don't set down those instincts, but maybe the strategies and the tactics that they've learned are not as applicable.
Right. I think the instincts are good. You probably know your kid better than you think you do. It's just, I think where we get in trouble is our kids are just growing up in such a complex world that the 1990 strategies don't work for 2026.
Yeah.
So it's not the instincts that are off, maybe, but it's maybe some of the tools and resources and strategies and understanding where behaviors are coming from. Because it's a lot more than just my kid is lazy or my kid is oppositional. There's a lot more going on under the surface.
Yeah, I mean, parenting back when you and I were kids was a lot different in tone and texture.
Yeah.
And I think our parents probably did their best, just like parents today are trying to do their best. But it might feel different, right? It might feel bigger with teenagers. It may even feel like they're more sensitive. Why is that?
I don't think they're more sensitive, but I think it's that they're more overwhelmed.
Mm.
I think there's just a lot going on and they're just overloaded. So, their system is constantly taking on information and constantly being bombarded with the digital world, right? And so I think that as parents, when you and I were kids, we had the opportunity to slow down. We had the opportunity to recharge. You think about what's going on today, kids don't get that. It's just a constant barrage of input. And so I think that their baselines are just so activated all the time that when you get into hard moments, so maybe the parent looks at them wrong or says the wrong thing, or we're asking them to do something they don't want to do, they're already flooded, and that just opens up the gates, And so now you have this kid coming at you that looks really oppositional, really disrespectful, but really what's going on is you have a flooded nervous system.
I think about a bad day when I was a kid, and I might go outside and shoot hoops for a really long time.
Right.
And I could disconnect. No one was around. I didn't have to be checking social media. Nobody could ping me.
Right.
And I had that time to check out. Our kids don't get that today.
And you weren't constantly worried about what you might be missing out on while you were shooting hoops.
Right.
You could just be in the moment.
How has that changed the escalation? How has that become so rampant where it's almost like it's become contagious, where escalation is not just something that happens every once in a while, but it's happening more often?
Yeah. No, I like that you use the word contagious because I think it is contagious. I mean, and it's biological, One thing we're going to talk about a lot on the podcast, and we already have a little bit, is just that our nervous systems are wired to mirror each other. It's in our biology. And so when your teenager's nervous system is escalated, your natural response as a parent is to escalate and to meet it. And the problem is now you have two escalated nervous systems, so nothing logical is going on. No problem solving is going on. And so that becomes real contagious. And it's not because you're a bad parent. It's just kind of the way we're wired, right? So someone has to break the pattern, and that someone has to be you. The parent has to be the one that breaks the pattern.
Yeah.
Because you're the one with the hopefully fully developed nervous system.
We hope so.
And prefrontal cortex, right? And your kids is still developing. So it has to be the adult, and you have to be the one that can be the calm in the storm.
Yeah, because it's really, as you mentioned before, I mean, it is mimetic. We have mimetic genes where or mimetic cells where we mimify each other. If you're angry and I become angry, then we continue to go up
Yeah.
that contagion.
So the question becomes, can I stay regulated when they're not regulated? That if that's
Yeah.
one skill you develop as a parent, develop that one skill. I can stay regulated in the heat of the storm. You're going to have a lot more influence.
How does that happen in that power struggle moment? I think that seems to be the thing that most parents struggle with, because it's either a fight, flight, or a freeze moment, right? So,
Yeah.
what do parents need to do in that moment where the power struggle is happening? The battle is, I mean, the warriors are on the battlefield. What does a parent do?
Well, I don't know if your parent ever said to you something along the lines of because I'm the adult, but
Because I said so.
because I said so. Yeah, we just have to rethink that a little bit. A power struggle is not necessarily a discipline issue. It's just two threat responses colliding, right? And so if nobody's in their thinking mind, then the logic goes out the window and you just can't, I talk about in one of the podcasts, I talk about you can't reason with a nervous system that feels unsafe.
Mm.
It's like trying to install software on a computer that's on fire, right? That metaphor. So, the hardware is just not going to take the input. So we want to have influence on our kids. And the first thing we have to realize as parents is if we are activated, if our nervous system is not regulated, then we lose our influence. So you can't lecture in that moment. You can't teach in that moment. You're just mirroring the conflict, right?
Yeah.
So I think just as parents realizing you're human too, and it's okay if you mess that up. We all mess that up. But, how do you repair it? How do you do it different next time? And how do you learn to regulate in those hard moments? Really important.
It seems like that regulation is something that teaches kids as much as the teaching that happens later on does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've referenced before the iceberg effect, that oftentimes in these power struggles, what is seen above the surface is simply a red herring of something that's much bigger happening underneath the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. We respond so much to the behavior that we forget that all behavior pretty much is meeting a need, right? And all behavior makes sense in context. So we have to ask ourselves, what's underneath the surface? What are we not seeing? That behavior that looks like defiance or laziness or attitude, there's a reason behind that. So learning how to ask the right questions, learning how to be patient and get to the real stuff is important. And for, man, for most of the kids I'm dealing with, they have some things in common. It's fear of failure.
Mm.
It's fear of not fitting in, not being good enough. Those are kind of driving a lot of these behaviors. I told the story about the 16-year-old that was struggling with going to school, right? And parents just look at that and go, no, you're going to school. This is a non-negotiable. We're not negotiating this. Stop being lazy. But when they found out that there was this huge gap between his working memory and his processing speed, we learned that there was something underneath the surface that was driving that behavior. It wasn't lazy. It wasn't defiance. It was, I don't want to look stupid in front of my friends. So when they learned how to address the real problem, school problem went away. It wasn't a problem anymore.
So, walk me through how, when you're in the midst of this battle and you're talking about the iceberg effect, and a parent may have this moment where they know that they need to regulate, they need to pause before they go into a correction, before they go into a teaching moment. What does that look like in a real moment?
Yeah, great question. And I wish I could give you an ABC answer to that, right? Because it's every moment is different, but there's some principles. The first one is that we got to understand that a lot of that behavior is shame driven, right? And you're not going to lecture shame away. That just makes the shame bigger.
Mm.
So your teenager is, something that you said, what happens in the real moment? So real moment, your your teenager comes into the room, slamming doors, dropping bags, lots of attitude. Your instinct, that first instinct might be to correct the behavior. Hey, that's not okay. We don't act like that in this house. Don't do that. If you're thinking regulation first, you're going to notice what's going on inside of you. So just learning how to pause and first say, oh, okay, that got a response out of me. How do I respond instead of reacting? Then once you do that, you can just ask a curious question. Hey, it looks like you're really frustrated. What's going on? And you have to do that with intent, right? So you put the phone down, you make eye contact, you stop whatever you're doing, even though these things never happen at a convenient time. You have to be present. And if you do that, what you're doing is you're modeling for your teenager, this is safe. This is a place where you can land and be messy, and you're still going to be accepted. And I really care about you, right? Then you can start getting to what's underneath the surface on that iceberg.
You mentioned before that the battles oftentimes are because the parent feels threatened or feels like a failure as well.
Yeah.
So when they're going into this regulation, how does a parent overcome that initial feeling of feeling like a failure?
Well, if you're still in the game, you're not a failure. That's the first thing, right? We're still trying. And so one of the things that we know in psychology and in science is that healthy relationships that work, whether that's coworkers, with your spouse, with your children, relationships that work have a lot of repair in them. There's repair going on all the time. What that means is it's okay for me to make a mistake and say I'm sorry. And it's okay for you to make a mistake and say you're sorry. And that's harder than it sounds. Sometimes I might make a mistake and be willing to say I'm sorry, but you're not willing to hear it. And sometimes I might make a mistake and I'm not willing to say I'm sorry. Both of those have to be in place. So when a parent feels like, oh, I'm just messing this up all the time, you got to remember that it's the process that counts, right? So taking accountability, taking responsibility, sometimes that's pretty hard for parents. We're worried that that's going to undermine our parental authority or something like that. But really, you don't have to agree with the argument. You don't have to take their side to take accountability.
And accountability is really just accounting for what's happening. And I know
Right.
one of the things that you mentioned is that it's important for parents to account for or name the emotion that they're feeling or something that they're experiencing. I've also heard you say that there's some actual neuroscience behind this. So can you walk our listeners through why that's so important and how does that work in the brain?
Sure. Yeah. There's brain scans to prove it. It really is fascinating to me, the neuroscience behind this. By naming a feeling, whether it's our own or if we're naming it for our children. So if you say something like, hey, man, it looks like you're really frustrated right now. Tell me what's going on. One of the things you're doing is you're getting them out of their amygdala and back into their prefrontal cortex just by naming the feeling. And that works for ourselves too. If we can say, oh, what just happened really hurt. That zinged something in me. Just doing that can make you a little bit more regulated, right? And then once you name it, you're also communicating that I'm in tune with you. This is safe. Again, this is making this a two-way thing. So naming the feeling really does get us into a place where we have more influence on ourselves and on those we're trying to help.
It sounds like, too, Scott, that you're talking about consistently bringing people back into the present.
Yeah.
And when you name an emotion that you're experiencing, you're not living in the past and you're not projecting feelings out in the future. You're pulling back to the present. How important is that for parents to do to bring their kids back into the present?
Well, it's it's so important, and it's so challenging at times, because when we're triggered, when we have an emotional response, what typically happens is all the other times we've had a similar response come back, right? So this probably isn't the first time your kid has said no to you, and it triggers all of that. Or it might have even triggered something in you that's really old. Like, I was a kid when I felt like I was out of control.
Mm.
So when you're naming an emotion, and when you are being curious in your questions, so saying things like, instead of, um, man, you're being really disrespectful today, saying something like, you seem off. What's going on? Changes it from a judgment of the person to, we're acknowledging the behavior, right? And that brings us back into the present moment. It's not like you are a disrespectful person. It's, no, this behavior right now feels not great. Let's talk about it. And that brings us back to the moment, instead of maybe all the other stuff that's happened.
Now, there is a point where parents have to make a decision. So they may decide, what's happening right now with my child has moved beyond my skill set.
Yeah.
I need professional help, professional support. And while that might feel heavy or difficult for parents, I think things that are heavy and difficult become easier when they understand the questions to ask or the skills that need to be there.
Yeah.
How do you walk people through that decision-making process? Are there filters? Is there a protocol that you use, that you teach people to say, hey, you need to ask for help when?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's two main things. The first is safety. All of these things we talk about are about building relationship, and preventing future problems, and working on current problems. But when it comes to the point where things are literally unsafe, so they're talking about harming themselves, there's persistent patterns that are getting worse, where you can see them completely disengaging. I'm not talking about having a bad day or a bad week, or maybe even a bad month, but when these things are persistent and last, then that's telling us something more is going on. And it might be something that needs, professional help, or maybe even we need to take them out of their current environment for them to have some hope.
We know that there could be a too late to that conversation. Is there a too early?
Yeah, I don't think there's a too early. No. And if you're asking the right people, so as you look for professional help, um, there's so much online. There's so many things available for parents now, but you want to talk to people who will be honest with you. So, I often will talk to parents who maybe are looking for my services, and I will say, well, have you tried this? So have you been doing maybe some family counseling or outpatient counseling, or what are the things you've tried? And literally, if they haven't done any of that, I'm going to say, do those things first. Let's try those first, because we want to have the intervention be the least kind of disruptive to the system as we can.
Mm.
But often parents will say, let's just get through the school year, then we'll see. Or let's just get to the end of the summer, and then we'll see. And they just put it off and put it off. And things can become bigger. And the longer you wait, the harder it is to bring it back.
So having an arbitrary timeline doesn't make sense, is what I'm hearing.
No.
If you were to speak directly to a parent that's listening to this right now, and you wanted them to get one or two things away from this particular episode, what would it be?
Well, I keep going back to this, but I want parents to really buy into the idea that the relationship is the intervention. That's the most important thing. The more connected you are with each other, the less correction you're going to need. But the more connected you are with each other when you do correct, it's going to land better, right? And you're going to see better results. So really focusing on the relationship is the most important thing. It's not the consequence or the perfectly timed lesson or any of that that's really going to stick. It's the relationship. And the second thing is, if you want to influence the relationship, you have to work on yourself. So that includes being regulated and learning how to manage. But it also includes taking a look at, what are my patterns? What are the things that I don't want to deal with? And you have to get honest about those, because your kids pick up on that. Your kids are going to pick up on those things. And when you're not feeling, not that we always have to feel great, but when you're not feeling safe in yourself, your kids are not going to feel safe around you.
Yeah, great answers. I know we've got many more questions to come that we're going to cover in at least one more episode. Anything else that you want to give to our listeners?
You don't need to be a perfect parent. There's no such thing, first of all, but our kids don't need perfect parents. They need attuned, real, honest parents. So that's admitting when we mess it up. That's being willing to deal with our fears and our own shame, and being the kind of leader to our families that they need us to be. And that's just by you get up every morning and you try again. Thanks for being here for this one. I hope that that was useful. If there are questions that you as the listeners have, I would love to hear them. If this landed for you or was helpful, please let us know. Or if you have your own questions or things you'd like us to maybe go into a little bit more deeply, let us know. You can email your questions to theattunedparentpc@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you. And also, if this episode landed or was helpful, or somebody who it might be helpful to, please share. Give us that 5-star rating so we can reach more people and help more people. And as always, if you feel like maybe things are getting a little too out of control and you need more help, feel free to reach out. Stillwater Academy is here to help you. Contact information is in the show notes, and we'd love to hear from you and see if we can help. So till next time, thanks for listening.